Rocks and stones may break my bones, but nothing will ever kill me. Well, let's see now. First, they tried burning me. Then, they tried burying me. But this is my favorite. They even tried holy water. But I just keep on ticking. Because they promised me that. They, the dream people, the ones that gave me this job. Dreams, I am forever. Too bad you're not.
The Tainted Glove Network presents Yumper and Svo at the Show podcast with Tom Yumper Garcia.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
And Justin Svo Svoboda.
Prime time, bitch.
Two guys from Chicago talking movies.
Welcome everyone to episode 16 of the Yumper and Svo at the Show. I'm one of your co-hosts, Tom Garcia, aka Yumper, and I'm with my co-host, Justin Svo Svoboda. What's up, Svo?
Hey, Yump, how are you doing today, man? I'm good.
I'm all right, man. Just having some technical difficulties today.
It's okay. We've all been there, man. I work in technology. You think I've shown a customer an iPhone and like my demo hasn't worked? It happens to the best of us.
Yeah. Luckily, it was caught early in that after we recorded the whole, thought we recorded the whole episode. But we got an action-packed show today. Why don't we just roll right into what we've been watching? So, Svo, you want to pop us off?
Yeah, absolutely. The wife and I went to the theater to go see Bros. We hadn't had a lot of time together, so we just decided to go to dinner and see a movie. And we went to Oak Brook 12 and we saw Bros. It's directed by Nicholas Stoller. The guy did Forgetting Sarah Marshall, which you guys know is like one of my absolute favorite movies. It's basically a typical romantic comedy, but it's about the LGBTQ plus community. So it was nice to see some different representation on the screen. We know that representation matters, and you and I are both like big advocates and supporters of the LGBTQ plus community. So it was definitely cool to see Billy Eichner on there, and not just two cis white people in a movie. So it was definitely cool. And then we came home the other day. We were supposed to have friends over to watch Hocus Pocus 2, but when they got there, it turns out they've never seen Hocus Pocus 1. So we had to put that off a couple days, and the wife came home from work and we watched Hocus Pocus 2. It's a good sequel. It's funny. It's good, clean holiday fun, for Halloween. It's not as good as the original. There's some good Apple jokes in there, which, mean a lot to me. And there's some Roomba jokes on there for our homie Beefloaf, who's a big supporter of the show. I liked it. It wasn't perfect, but it's 25 years later that the sequel came out. So I enjoyed it though. How about you, Yump?
I saw two new movies this week. The first one was the movie Smile, the thriller Smile, that is basically based off a short film called Laura Hasn't Slept. Very creepy. Highly recommend you go see it. It's the debut film by Parker Finn as a director. It has Kyle Gallner, who actually appears in a movie we're going to be talking about later on. Totally creepy, like a psychological thriller. A lot of sinister vibes from it. As I said earlier, when we were talking off air, the movie did a great job promoting very short scenes through previews, as well as having actors come behind home plate at baseball games, just smiling. They had actors go into movie theaters, creeping people out, just smiling. So it's really creepy. I enjoyed it a lot. I actually wouldn't mind going to see it again. And then the second movie I watched was the Hellraiser remake with my wife when it first came out. Huge fan of the original. This one isn't really on par with it. I would say the Cenobites look awesome. I love the redesign of them. As in the original, they had more dominatrix. I guess wear, and this one it's more. They're all covered in flesh, and their body parts are basically like mutilated.
You're into that dominatrix stuff?
Maybe I am. No, but I just like to see a different like take on how things look. And I think that aspect of the movie was good, but in terms of story, I thought it was horrible. The characters were just horrible. I prefer the original. I know some people prefer this one, which I think is, every to whoever it owns, whatever you like, but it just wasn't for me. But
Okay. I mean, I'm still gonna watch it. I went back and watched the original this week, but I'll go in there with probably some opinions already formed based on what you just said.
yeah, I mean, I would like you to watch it. Tell me what you think. I mean, don't just take my word for it. Like experience it yourself. It just wasn't for me. With that, well, let's move on to our guest. Now we have our segment in defense of, and do you want to introduce our guest?
Absolutely. So we have this segment every week where a friend of ours gets to come on, or someone that we admire gets to come on and defend a movie that they enjoy that might not be, a popular opinion. And we're really excited to welcome Herb Lawrence from CHGO Sports onto the show and talk about his movie. Welcome to the show, Herb.
Thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate you guys having me on your show to talk about one of the movies I really enjoy, and a couple other questions, of course, right?
Absolutely, yeah. We usually do this thing where we ask our guests a couple questions just about movies, real basic. Are you cool if we kick that off?
Yeah, that's cool.
Absolutely. So, Herb, growing up, what movie theater did you go to? I have a guess, but I'm not going to say it.
We grew up in the western suburbs around Wheaton area, so for our little things like the second run movies, we would see like Who's Framing Roger Rabbit at the Wheaton Theater, the little one downtown Wheaton, which is no longer in use as far as like a theater actually. But for first run movies, we would go to Stratford Square Mall and go to the theater inside the mall. So I just think I remember distinctly watching Showgirls at Stratford Square Mall, and I wasn't 17. I felt at the time like I was doing something so risque. And then I saw the movie. I was like, oh, God, risk it all for that terrible movie. But, whatever. It was good times at Stratford Square Mall, as they didn't check IDs too much for that showing of Showgirls.
So I guarantee you at some point, you and I have crossed paths either at Stratford Square Theater, because I grew up on the border of like Bartlett and Streamwood.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And another funny story is my father-in-law worked as an usher as a second job at that Stratford Square Mall Theater for about 30 years. Like they just for extra dough, and he was an usher there. And even he worked at the AMC, for the last 10 years. He didn't quit till COVID started. So like we have movie posters all in my basement that he took from the movie theater. So our paths have probably crossed at some point at Stratford Square Mall. I don't know if you've seen it lately, but it's like a ghost town.
I could only imagine because my fiance's from St. Charles, so I go past the Charlestown Mall all the time, and it's empty. There's nothing there except for like a Von Moore, and I expect that to be like most malls because that's what we used to do. I don't know why it went away. It was good, easy, clean, inexpensive fun for some teenagers just to hang around the mall, look for the opposite sex, and never talk to them at all. Sorry, my dog's barking in the background.
No, that's okay.
He didn't agree with my opinion there, but malls are great. I enjoyed them, and I'm sad the demise of the mall has come in our lifetime because every Friday night it would be going to the mall and watching a movie or going to Blockbuster and grabbing a film for the weekend. Hopefully you can find a nice movie that you want to see. It's not rented out already.
I love that. There are two malls that are still pretty popping in the Chicagoland area, Oakbrook and Woodfield. Still have people there all the time. That's not going anywhere, but I get it. No, I love malls too. All right, second question. What movie do you watch when you are feeling sick or you're down, maybe a little sad? Do you have a go-to movie?
Yeah, it's a 80s movie that's kind of campy. It's one of my favorite movies. It's just one of the guys. The actors and actresses you probably don't know. I mean, the most popular one you probably know now is William Zabka, who played all the bad dudes in the 80s. So he played
Johnny Lawrence.
Exactly, Johnny Lawrence in The Karate Kid, who's now in the remake of Cobra Kai, which is a great great YouTube thing. I love that show. Gotta wait. Was it season 4 we're in right now? Man,
We're gonna be going into season 6.
6.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's 5.
I'm a little late then. So Cobra Kai is a great show, and Johnny Lawrence, William Zabka is also the villain in this movie, where he's like a high school bully. This person wants to become. She's a woman who doesn't get a scholarship because she feels that if she was a man, she would get the scholarship because all the men are treated, you know, much better in high school. It's like, well, time never changes. It's that movie in the 80s. And
Was this
so true tonight.
Was this a remake? Like, was this
Yeah,
remade with Amanda
Amanda
Bynes?
Bynes. Amanda Bynes was in the remake. and
Pretty
it's
much,
nowhere,
yeah.
Okay.
It's nowhere near as good as the original one.
No, not at all. And that movie is like she just, cuts her hair and becomes looking like a Ralph Macchio, which is the joke in the movie, and lives life as a man and sees how the world treats her as a boy instead of a girl. And so it's a good movie to lift your spirits up. Good acting. For a kid, when I watched it first, it never leaves me that feeling I had as a kid when watching this movie. There is a slight nudity in it too, so that probably sticks in my brain as one of the first movies I saw something I wasn't supposed to see.
And her looking at the pictures, she totally does look like a Ralph Macchio.
Yeah. That's it always improves my mood no matter what. I love that movie. It just takes me back to being a kid watching that movie.
I love that you mentioned it's like a phrase, like you're chasing that euphoria of seeing something again for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that way about, and I'm gonna get shit for this, but I feel that way about the Star Wars prequels. Like, I wish I could watch them again for the first time, because those are my Star Wars movies. Like, so I love that you mentioned that. Like, you can never capture that feeling of seeing a movie for the first time. And that's kind of what this show is about. Like, we can talk about directors and we can talk about that stuff, but where you were, who you were with, how it made you feel when you saw it.
Yeah, it's an undeniable feeling that movies and music are part of our lives, and when you hear or see these things again, it takes you back to maybe a better time in life or a time that you remember fondly, and it just creates those memories again that you thought you had lost. You thought that you something sparks in you in the back of your brain, or it's just like, yeah, that was a great feeling, and this movie made me feel that way. Now I can't watch it all the time because that would go away with seeing it way too much. But once a year you get to see this movie again. It's like, yeah, I needed that feeling.
Yeah, I get
any
it.
type of Christmas movie that everybody watches every year. The Hocus Pocus movie that you guys are talking about, the sequel is out. That probably makes people feel around this time how they need to feel for this time, because it reminds them of a nice cozy blanket or somebody who was around at that time that might not be around anymore.
I love that. I love that you said that. Now, our final question before we get into your actual segment. Do you remember what movie you saw at the theater the first time your parents dropped you off to go hang out with your friends by yourself?
Ooh, it's going to really date me.
That's okay, man. Mine was Scream in
Wow.
1996, and I was 14. So, like, dude, don't feel bad, man. Let it all out there.
Well, my mom was not there, so it was just me and my sisters, and the movie E.T. Extraterrestrial. Like, it's an old movie.
Fitz is gonna get very excited hearing this.
Fitz is gonna be very excited to hear that, because that was his answer last week when we had him on.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a phenomenon. Like, when I think about that movie, I'm like, yeah, that was me and my sisters watched that, and we're just like, oh God, like these things, hadn't happened. And he's such a great character, E.T., friendly, and Drew Barrymore, great acting, and forgot the male child's name.
Elliot.
Yeah, I mean Elliot, but the actor's name, I forgot his name.
Henry
Thomas.
Henry Thomas, right?
Yeah, and he was great at acting. It was just a good story, and I was glad I got to see it at a theater, because I think seeing a great film at a theater, it just heightens the experience in the movie for you.
I think I can't speak for Yump, but I think we're both in complete agreement with you that, like, seeing a movie in the theater, it could change you. Like, it could leave you with a feeling that, like, maybe mold you into the person that you become, or you're bound to become, or you're supposed to become, or your character or whatever. But I completely agree with you.
Yeah, totally agree, Herb. Love the fact you were talking about how, back in the day, how we all used to go to the movies. I can outdate myself too. I mean, when we used to look at the newspaper or call a hotline to see when the movies were playing and what times they were playing to go, I went to the Quarry a lot or Fort City or, Harlem Quarters to see the
Mhm.
older movies that were released. Just remember going in as a kid and then seeing the THX, advertisement for the surround sound.
Mhm.
And it was just, it still gets me to this day because I don't even think they do it anymore. Um,
Mm-mm.
it was just like a whole experience. It was like a fun thing to do as a kid, to do with your family, do with your friends, and that's kind of like a dying breed now. Like movies are more you know, transforming over to streaming now. Everything's streaming.
Yeah, I think we talked about it when we had Roper on, about like how I used to look forward, because we were a Sun Times family. We were never a Tribune family. My dad worked third shifts, and he would bring the Sun Times home every morning for me so I could read Roper and Tellender, and then go to the Weekend Plus and read Ebert's review, and then check out the Movie Times to see where I was going to go with my friends that night, to the Sony theaters in Streamwood. Um, I love it. I love it. Are you what do you think, Jump? Are we ready to talk about this movie?
Yeah, let's get into it. So, Herb, the movie you picked, which to me was very interesting, you picked
Mhm.
Kissing Jessica Stein, which is released in 2001, and it's directed by Charles Herman Wormfield, starring Jennifer Westfield and Heather Jurgensen. This movie had a box office of 10 million on a $1 million budget. So, Herb, tell me why you picked this movie.
It's just the fact that I am not a white Jewish woman or a person that lives in New York. I felt like kind of drawn to this as their experience. I seek that out, because I can't live life as somebody else. I can only live as the experience I had, and of course I watch movies that see myself reflected on the screen all the time. But I want to have some different experience that I wouldn't never experience in a movie. And Kissing Jessica Stein, it was between that and Sidewalks of New York. I don't know if you guys seen that. That's about the same time. They're both like styled as like these New York independent films, and pretty much that's what they were. But I don't know. I feel like these independent films in the early or the late '90s, early 2000s just had a draw to them. Like I saw Jennifer Westfield, the actress who plays Jessica Stein, as a perfect amalgamation of what I had thought of that time as a person of the Jewish faith. And I was like, okay, she's playing the character which she wrote with Heather Jurgensen, and I would not have known, you know, if it was somebody else who played it. It's good to know that she has, firsthand experience in writing the character and then portraying the character on the screen. And I felt that her performance, Heather Jurgensen's performance, and I think this is where Jennifer met her husband, now ex-husband, John Hamm, because he has a small part in this film too. It's just a nice, campy, um, romantic comedy, uh, put into like a late 20s Jewish woman's perspective, where I don't know if that necessarily had been sought out or shown on the theater screen as much. So it was very refreshing to me, and the acting was great. The pace was awesome. Just some heartbreaking scenes where you're gonna cry, you're gonna laugh, you're gonna enjoy yourself all the time in this film. It's just a nice movie to watch, and it's only 100 minutes, so it gets through pretty quickly.
There was a scene early on in the movie where they're in church or temple,
Yep.
and her mom is there and her grandmother is there, and they're talking about her like in the third person. She looks at them both and she's like, "For Christ's sakes, I'm trying to grieve." Um, and I thought that was a really really like a really nice moment where yes, you get a perspective of someone else's, like, someone that you might not necessarily live their life or see just through their point of view. Um, I do think the pace of this movie was a little slow for me.
Hmm.
I do get that like Miramax independent movie vibe from it,
Yes.
just the way it was shot and just the way it was filmed. Very much kind of like I don't know what's the movie that Ed Burns did.
That's the one I think I was talking about. Sidewalks in New York.
Not Sidewalk.
Not that one.
No, I'm talking about Beautiful Girls.
Oh yeah.
Ed Burns did this movie, Beautiful Girls. I think that's what it feels like that. So I get it. Now, when you see this movie and like you defend it, do your friends be like, Herb, why do you like this movie?
Everybody I've told that I watched this movie and I've told that they should watch, like, why do you like this movie? It's not, I wouldn't think this would be your style, but like sometimes you gotta find something out of your comfort zone to enjoy more, like to expand your horizons. And so, yeah, they haven't either seen it or have seen it and it was nothing to them. So I usually, I don't go tooth and nail with people with it. I just like watch it and tell me you don't like it. Watch it on a Saturday night and tell me you don't like the movie and it doesn't, warm the heart and make you cry and all the good stuff that a movie's supposed to do. Where, I didn't see myself in these movies. I really couldn't put myself in any of these characters' positions as a person that hasn't gone through any of these positions. But it was good to be invited into that space. They talking about Seder and how the Jewish faith, that one of the main things that she thought that her mother was pressuring her to get married as her brother got married or is about to get married, and so she felt shame that she was in a lesbian relationship. And that's another thing I like about it. It shows the LGBTQ plus community in a positive light and not in this, Hollywood,
Like
lipstick lesbian type of thing.
Yeah, back
situation.
room, like
Yeah.
underground. Yeah, no, I get it. I love that because we know, like, and we can say it, that representation matters, right?
hmm
So I do think that that's very important. I love that. I love that you defended that. Yump, you got any other questions?
No, I kind of agree with Soul on this a little bit. It was like slower paced for my liking. It wasn't a horrible movie, but I kind of like I saw Big Fat Greek Wedding
hmm
before I saw this movie. And this movie was made before that. So I think just in that sense, like I kind of get the same feels from what my Big Fat Greek Wedding was going for because it's a more based on a Greek family.
hmm
This does have the aspect of having a woman of Jewish faith. I do like some of the aspects of the comedy of the movie that I thought were done really well. Like I said, just the pacing was a little off for me. I do love the fact in the movie though, when they're at dinner with John Hamm and her coworker basically just tells her about herself and how she can't get over a person that she was previously with and just
hmm
waitresses her down from everybody, which I thought was hilarious. Um, but like I do like the crossing the lines and showing that the stuff that wasn't really talked about then. I mean, we had Chasing Amy when we did the Kevin Smith video with the reviews with, you know, um, My Sock Summer. And that was like one of the first movies to really put out too, gay and lesbian relationships, but she was trying to actually entering into a hetero relationship while this is a woman
Yep.
entering a lesbian relationship. And I kind of got the same vibes to it. Um, I definitely recommend you guys check it out and let us know what you think about it. Herb, I do like the fact that you went to like a bunch of details about why you chose this movie and how it, you like to see yourself, through different eyes, put your place in, that you probably can experience. And I think that's an awesome way to look at, film.
Yeah, and I think it's important because I cannot, be any of these different races or classes, but I can, get a short glimpse into one person's interpretation that is of that face. That that lifestyle, maybe I can like maybe relate. It's like, oh yeah, they have that, and in my family we have this. We're not too far apart, and, at the basic elements, as humans we're not that far apart, but our tribes sometimes like try to pull us in different ways. And so me watching this movie, I feel like I'm not doing anything grand, but I'm expanding my horizon so I can like and understand other people in their lives and go through their lives maybe thinking a little bit differently than I thought before with a prejudiced eye. Instead, this movie doesn't do that all the way, but I'm getting a glimpse into it, and then maybe it could lead to other conversations off screen, and people you can just meet and say, "Hey, I used to have this preconceived notion of a person, but this movie gave me a glimpse into something that I might have missed in my upbringing." So I feel like, people should always try to get out their comfort zone, because you might find something that you find interesting or you might like, and you might find that the differences you have in life are not that far apart.
I don't think that could have been put or said any better than what you did. Like, we're not that different from other people in the grand scheme of things. And if this gives someone else a different perspective on someone else lives their life and helps you understand it a little better, then even better. I love that you said that. Herb, thank you so much for defending that movie and bringing this to my attention, because I didn't see it till this afternoon. Like, I knew I had to watch it for the pod, but I hadn't seen it till this afternoon. So thank you for like giving me that perspective on that.
I appreciate it. And I thank you guys for having me on and talk about this movie. I appreciate
Yeah.
it very much. And I hope somebody goes and watches it today. And if you don't like it, please tell Yump, tell Swell, like, hey, Herb was wrong. I would make perfect. Acting Wall 23. You could tell me too. Yay or nay on this movie. I'm not above arguing more about this movie.
No, that's totally great. Herb, you want to plug your stuff you're involved in?
Yeah. Myself, Sean Anderson, and Vinny Duper, we do a little podcast 5 days a week called CHGO White Sox. The brand new, about 6 months ago, we started this podcast network where we're the White Sox representatives, and we have all sports in Chicago covered through CHGO Sports. On YouTube, you can follow us where we do a daily show Sunday through Thursday live on YouTube, and then those shows are later ready for podcast like the next day. So that's where they can find me on there. And then Eckner Wall 23, which is Lawrence spelled backwards with 2-3 for Robin Ventura, is my Twitter handle.
I did not realize either of those things, that's what that number was for, or that's what your Twitter handle was. That is a game changer.
Yeah, there was another Lawrence at the Score, Lawrence Holmes, and he spells his name differently. But if you would say people lay Lawrence and I turned around, it would kind of be confusing. So from there, I used to just put my name as Herb on the schedule for the weekly schedule, and then for my name, let's just switch it backwards to Ecknerwall 23. So it's much easier. People don't call me Lawrence as much.
I hate to do this to you, but I got to do one last thing before you leave. Then we're going to let you go, I promise.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you want to see as the next manager of the Chicago White Sox?
Whew.
I know this is a movie pod, but Yumper and I met through baseball Twitter. We're both baseball fans. So I'm the White Sox fan. Yump's a converted White Sox fan. It's happening. So I just want to know who you think, or who would you like to see as the next manager of our Chicago White Sox?
In my dreams, I would want Joe Espada as the White Sox next manager. He's the current bench coach of the Houston Astros, and he does come with that Houston Astros stink. He's part of that. But also, there's people talk highly about his baseball smarts. Comes from an analytically inclined organization in the Houston Astros, who have a staff that dwarfs the White Sox 5 and the research and development staff. And I think he would probably demand that type of information, that type of manpower to be on his staff too, if he takes a job outside of Houston, which I think, most people think that when Dusty retires, it's Joe Espada's job to have. So for him to get away from there would take something pretty special, and you probably have to offer him or allow him to put his staff out there and hire more people. So I think it would change the White Sox organization in a small way, but a good way, because bringing more numbers, bringing more information is never a bad thing. And having a person that understands how to absorb that information and then decide if he wants to use it partly, all the way, halfway, and then use some of his baseball gut, cool. And he can do that to a digestible size for the players to understand what he wants to do. So I think the manager's job mostly is in the dugout or in the clubhouse. The in-game stuff is kind of important, but I didn't think it was that important until Tony La Russa messed it all up. And I think any manager that shows up is a pretty good manager. And I think this guy, Joe Espada, the in-game stuff, he'll do it well. I think the clubhouse things, he'll do even better.
I love it. Well, Herb, thank you for your time, man. Thanks for coming on and talking movies with us. Follow him on Twitter. Check out CHGO Sports. Thanks, Herb.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Herb, for coming on.
Thank you guys. Have a good night.
You too,
All right.
boss.
Herb Lawrence, man. I kind of geeked out a little bit. I used to listen to Herb on the radio all the time.
That's a big
Uh,
deal.
yeah,
That's a big deal. Yeah.
yeah. Herb's the man. Herb's one of the nicest guys I met in person. He's a total sweetheart, and he was awesome for coming on. Check him out on CHGO. He knows a lot of baseball knowledge, as you heard. Just an all around good dude. But with that, Swole, why don't you tell everybody what we're gonna be talking about?
Man, this is a big episode. This is an episode that we're really, really excited about. One of my favorite series. But today, we're breaking down the Nightmare on Elm Street series.
Yep, as you both know, as everyone knows, me and you are huge horror fans. Uh, Nightmare on Elm Street is the pinnacle, I think, of the horror genre, outside of the Halloween series. But I think Nightmare has had a better run than the Halloween series. But I'm really excited to talk about this one today. So you ready to get into it?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's get into our first one.
Please, God.
This is God.
The original Nightmare on Elm Street, released in 1984. This was written and directed by Wes Craven, starring Heather Langenkamp, Johnny Depp, Robert Englund, and John Saxon. This movie had a budget of $1.1 million and made $57 million at the box office. Swole, tell me about the original Nightmare.
I mean, what is there to say about this movie besides it's iconic? Freddy Krueger basically ruled the 80s, and it was because of this movie. Everyone was afraid of the gloves. Everyone knew the song. Heather Langenkamp basically became, I don't want to say a household name, but she's known as Nancy from the Nightmare on Elm Street series. This movie is scary. It's creepy. It made me afraid to go to sleep. It's the pinnacle of the series. Now, I'm not saying there aren't other good movies in the series, but nothing tops this.
Totally agree with you there. Just some fun facts about this movie. This movie actually saved New Line Cinema. They were on the verge of bankruptcy. They didn't put much money into this movie, but this movie made that $57 million and actually saved them and kept their doors open. So it became such a running gag that New Line Cinema was sometimes referred to the house that Freddy built. I love this movie from top to bottom. The ending, I think it's a little weird. And the reason for that is because the producer, Bob Shea, wanted to have a different ending and went against what Wes Craven wanted to do. So you can see there's some clashing going on there. So that's why it ends in the way it ends. But perfectly paced. I love the character of Freddy, who wasn't even supposed to be played by Robert Englund. Wes Craven originally wanted a stunt person to do it. And they basically got him to hire Robert Englund for a more visual and more character animation for Freddy. He wanted more of a silent killer, but people are like pushing him to hire somebody with more, can do more through emotions and talking, which something that wasn't really known. I mean, before we knew about Michael Myers, who doesn't really talk, Leatherface didn't really talk. You know, Freddy has his own personality. He's more serious in this movie than the other ones that we're gonna get to, but it's done perfectly. Another thing with that, Kane Hodder was actually in consideration for Freddy, which is
Who's that, Yump?
He's the man who plays Jason in a majority of the Friday the 13th films, which I think is pretty crazy. Also a real cool guy. This movie, you know, it's inspired so many parodies. I mean, this movie spawned video games. This series, it just set off a big franchise. And you know, this is the first movie Johnny Depp was in, and the only reason he got cast in it was because Wes Craven's daughter thought he was cute, and she told her dad that if he doesn't hire Johnny Depp for this movie, she's gonna run away. And I have a interesting story about this too, Swell. So Johnny Depp went to his audition. Do you know who accompanied him to it?
Charlie Sheen.
No, he was in consideration for the Johnny Depp role, but they said he would cost too much money. Jackie Earl Haley.
Oh, full circle. I love that. That's good.
Yeah,
That's
I found that
good.
really interesting that he actually went with him to his audition, and this is the first movie that he actually got cast in. You know, this is his like coming out party. And I heard Ralph Macchio was actually considered for Rod's spot, but it wouldn't have worked out. I don't think I could see Ralph Macchio playing a bad boy.
No, and like it would have been too much like Ralph Macchio's character. It would have been too much like Johnny in The Outsiders, because Rod was kind of like kind of like a greaser dirt ball, like, and it would have been like him trying to turn Johnny bad, and it just wouldn't have worked.
Yeah, and just to show how Wes Craven loves horror films, in this movie, they're actually watching, The Evil Dead. I believe Nancy's watching it at one point.
Which is
And
funny because in 1996 Scream, they're watching Halloween, which was also directed by Wes Craven. They're watching Halloween during the final, like, killing scene at Stu Macher's house. So Wes likes to throw in homages to other movies in his movies.
yeah, and the reason he did that was because in, The Evil Dead, there's actually a poster of The Hills Have Eyes that Sam Raimi put in because he was a huge fan of the movie. Wes Craven saw that and put Evil Dead in his movie, and to thank him for that, in The Evil Dead 2, the Freddy glove is in the shed that Ash goes into.
And then
So,
that's awesome. For
yeah.
years, there was rumors that the sequel to a movie that we're going to talk about later in the show was going to include Ash in it.
Yes, that was a rumor. Can't say, enough about this movie. We can go on forever. I know we gotta move on down the list, but this movie just basically set the standard.
Completely agree.
But, let's move on to our next movie.
You've got the body. I've got the brain.
Nightmare on Elm Street 2: Freddy's Revenge that was released in 1985. This movie was directed by Jack Sholder. He did a movie called Alone in the Dark in 1982, and he also directed Wishmaster 2. This movie stars Robert Englund back as Freddy, Mark Patton, and Kim Myers. This movie had a budget of $3 million and a box office of 30. What I find really interesting about this movie is we have a male protagonist in this movie in Mark Patton or Jesse, and Wes Craven didn't want anything to do with this movie. He originally wanted the Nightmare series. He didn't even want the Nightmare series. He actually wanted Nightmare on Elm Street to be a standalone and not become a franchise. And when the studio saw how much money and how lucrative it was, they basically started a franchise with this movie, which to me is crazy. And another crazy thing about it is Robert Englund wasn't hired to be Freddy. They didn't want him back because they thought his demands were too high for salary. And when the director started filming, he realized the person they had to replace him wasn't as good and brought him back and met his demands, which is totally crazy. Like, what do you think about this movie, Paul?
So before I get into anything about how I feel about this movie, this has purely to do with this movie is fucking weird. Like, it's part of the series, but it's weird. And my thoughts on this movie being weird were formed long before this movie became a cult classic in the LGBTQ plus community. This movie is an absolute underground classic in the LGBTQ plus community. They love Jesse's character. There's a dance scene in that movie that they play at clubs and bars that is become iconic. But to me, this movie is bizarre. It is nowhere near as good as the original. I don't necessarily get what they were going for. It's probably one of my least favorites in the series.
Yeah, it's not as good as the original. I can understand what they were trying to go for. I think this is more of a cash grab in terms, and like you said, how it's really big in the LGBTQ community. Mark Patton is an openly gay actor. At the time, he wasn't, and he actually is the Scream King because of the way Jesse screams in this movie. He calls himself the Scream King, which I think is pretty funny. But there was a lot of changes of this. I think it tried to distance itself a lot from the Craven original. I mean, just with even the look of the house, like in Craven's movie, the house it has a blue door for Nancy's house, and this one has a red one. Little things like that. Freddy has stripes always down his arm, and Craven he didn't. He
Yeah.
started changing his appearance a lot, and I think it's just I know they don't want to replicate the original, but it's kind of branching off from the creator's vision. Was it a good movie? Not really. It had a lot of interesting takes on it. Freddy's taking over a person's body, so it's a kind of like a decent storyline. But there's a lot of innuendos in this movie that even that's why people are pointing it out today. All the innuendos in it. Him going to the gay bar to drink. The constant filming of him sweating and showing him, the way they would show a girl in the old slasher
Yeah.
flicks. And it was from you're seeing a guy in the same kind of role. So, I mean, it's not really uncomfortable looking. We see it's just this is for the ladies, this is for the LGBTQ community. So that's totally fine. I
I
just
think,
didn't like the whole storyline as much as I like the original.
well, I would agree. The one scene that always sticks out in my mind is the school bus scene.
That was like the opening and the ending, which I thought was okay. The one that always sticks out to me is for one, when he has the claw, the glove go through his hand. That part when Freddy actually comes out of him and kills his friend in his room.
Yeah.
The one thing about the Nightmare series as we go along is that their kills and the way they do the effects, the practical effects are awesome. Like we didn't talk about in the original, but the way they had he protrudes through the wall to look at Nancy while she's sleeping, that was all practically done. That's not CGI. CGI wasn't around this
It
time.
didn't even exist. Yeah.
So that was all them pushing through a practical effect to get that effect. And I do like how it's done here too. Movie kind of shows a little bit more of Freddy, he's still serious, but he's starting to get that little personality a little bit more. So we kind of see him shaping of the character. I just find it, pretty telling that Wes Craven didn't want to have a sequel. Oh, and Michael J. Fox was considered for the role of Jesse, but he couldn't do it because he was working on Back to the Future and Teen Wolf, which I thought was pretty hilarious. You know what I mean? I mean, you got to try new things out. And with that, let's move on to our next one.
This is it, Jennifer. Your big break in TV. Welcome to prime time, bitch.
Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors, released in 1987, directed by Chuck Russell, who's a Park Ridge boy. He also directed The Blob in 1988. He did the Jim Carrey movie, The Mask. He also did the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, Eraser. The screenplay was written by Wes Craven and also Frank Darabont. Frank Darabont actually wrote Shawshank Redemption, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, The Green Mile, and The Mist for some of the movies he did. This movie stars Heather Langenkamp coming back as Nancy, Robert Englund, Craig Wasson, Patricia Arquette in her first movie, Ken Sagos, and Rodney Eastman. This movie had a budget of $4.6 million and a box office of $44.8 million. Well, tell me about The Dream Warriors.
So I haven't seen this movie in a long time. I rewatched it actually this morning before the Bears game. I love the concept of this movie. It all takes place in a mental hospital. These kids are suffering from, their dreams. Freddy's haunting their dreams, and he starts to pick them off one by one. This is the movie that made me realize that Freddy was sinister as fuck. Like, there's a girl in the mental hospital that had a problem with addiction. So what did he do? He turned his hand into heroin needles, syringes, and he injected her. The one dude was really into puppets. So he turned him into a puppet and he walked him off the building like it looked like he killed himself. He made fun of the one kid in the wheelchair that couldn't walk. Like, in his dreams, he could walk. This movie was messed up. Like, it showed me that Freddy was really sinister, but I really, really liked it. I think this was a back to form of the Nightmare series.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because, like I said earlier, Wes Craven actually wrote the screenplay for this movie, and the reason he wrote it was because he thought this was going to be the last entry in the Nightmare series, and he was hoping it would end it. Spoiler, if you haven't seen this movie, at the end, the doctor character, Nancy, is actually killed off in this movie, which is unheard of these days, as the main character is killed off. But Craig Wesson, who looks a lot like Bill Maher, goes to sleep, and there's this little miniature household of the Nightmare house, and a light turns on. Well, it's implied in the movie that Freddy's still alive, but in the original script, it was actually supposed to be Nancy turning on that light to show that she's still watching over them to protect them, which is why Wes Craven wanted to, end the series off. But again, the studio didn't like that, and they changed the ending of it. This movie, to me, is probably, in my opinion, of the first 6, the second best, due to Craven's involvement in it. In terms of the original Nightmare movies, this is the second best of that series of Wes Craven's involvement in it. I do like the different aspects of having the kids have their own powers. each of the kids in the movie have personalities that are different, and they're kind of likable in character. Like you said, the special effects in the movie are out of this world. You know, when Freddy is killing the girl with the syringes, her track marks actually have mouths on them. So it's like pulling her
Freddy's
in.
face.
Yeah, just that the whole kid with the puppet, you know, the stop motion when Freddy's a little puppet that goes up to his body, you know, his bed, that was really done really well. You know, even the wizard master thing was done well, and he tells him, "I don't believe in fantasy, kid," and then he stabs him. You know, it's a nice little, you know, the effects in here are nice and, like, really eye appealing, and, you know, the jump scares are good. You know, the Freddy Snake, you know, the "Welcome to Primetime, bitch," which is the only line that Robert Englund actually improvised for Freddy. Everything else was written, which I
Ooh,
thought was pretty crazy.
we should use that in like a intro or something. I
Yeah,
love
you know, it'd be perfect. But, you know, this is where I think this is the top of the next 3 movies, and we start to go down a slope.
a little bit, and I'll get into my opinions on the next one when we go into it.
How about we go into it now?
Oh, that seems like a good segue, buddy.
Wanna suck the face?
No.
You flunk.
1988, Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master, directed by Rennie Harlin, who also directed Die Hard 2, Cliffhanger, Cutthroat Island, and Mindhunter. And he also did the 2004 Exorcist prequel, The Beginning. The screenplay was done by Brian Hedlund, who did LA Confidential, Mystic River, and directed 42. So some big heavy hitters working on this movie. This movie stars Robert Englund, Lisa Wilcox, Danny Hassel, John Beckman, and returning in the role of Joey is Rodney Eastman. Tuesday Night Extra replaces Patricia Arquette as Kristen, and Ken Sagos comes back as Ronald Kincaid. This movie had a budget of $13 million and a box office of $49.4 million. And this was the most money the Nightmare series made up to this point, and actually until Freddy vs. Jason. This is the most profitable Nightmare movie. Swole, tell me about Nightmare 4.
So Nightmare 4 is actually, and you say what you want, Yump, the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie that I saw in the franchise. I saw it spending the night at a friend's house when I still lived in Pilsen. Because my dad would let me watch whatever I want, but this was just not on his radar. He didn't care about these movies. I saw this spend the night at a buddy's house, and I watched. This was my introduction, and I loved it. The dog is the one that's responsible for raising Freddy from the dead because he pisses a trail of fire and lights the boiler room.
He pees on him and like he basically raises his bones, I guess.
He raises his bones, and you get the CGI from that. And also, there's a scene in this movie where the dude is like a karate master. What's his name? Rick, I think.
Yeah, Rick.
Rick is a karate master, and he thinks that he could use karate on Freddy Krueger. Like, there's a scene where they fight in the dojo. Like, Rick is in an all-white gi, right? If I remember this correctly.
Yep.
And they fight in the dojo, and it's corny and it's campy, but this is my introduction to Freddy, and it's my favorite. And I think the dog's name was Kincaid.
No, the dog's name is actually Jason. Kincaid was his owner.
Kincaid was his owner, yeah. And he was in part 3, so he came back.
Yeah, and like I said earlier,
Doesn't he die in the waterbed?
No, Joey dies.
Joey dies in the waterbed.
Kincaid's in the he dies in the where all the cars are. He's the one that first dies.
I remember now. Joey dies in the waterbed because Joey's kind of a pervert. Joey had the dream about the sexy nurse in part 3, and then I don't know if it was a mermaid or whatever.
It was a pinup girl.
It was a pinup girl swims up in the waterbed topless. So Joey was the pervert. He was the one that was always thinking about girls.
Yeah.
This is my favorite one of the series because it was the first one I saw. You know, I love it. It's corny. It's cheesy. It's bad, but I really, really liked it.
Yeah, this wasn't the first one I saw. I saw the original. I actually saw them like through sequence. Actually, not when they came out, obviously, because when this movie came out, I would have been 3 years old.
-3 or something like that.
I'd have been 3, but
the original I meant.
Yeah, I saw the original and I wasn't even born. first thing is like Kristen was played by Patricia Arquette in the previous film, and in this one she's not in it. And there were a lot of things going around like why was she replaced? Why? But it just comes down to from 2 stories I've read that are most like talked about is one, Patricia Arquette was pregnant with her child, or she just didn't want to do horror movies anymore. She didn't want to be typecast. And as we learn as actors, like sometimes it's a good choice and sometimes it isn't. But that was one of the things surrounding this movie. The actors of Kincaid and Joey, they thought they're gonna have a bigger role in this movie, and they were killed off pretty early in the movie. So Rodney Eastman and Kevin Sagos weren't too happy about that. This movie does have, again, great visual effects. When that girl is turned into a roach and she's in the Roachville Hotel, that's awesome. The part where they have the time lapse, that's actually considered Robert Englund actually considered that his favorite moment up to this point in the series.
The faces on the pizza.
Yes, the faces on the pizza when he eats the sausage, that's an awesome part too. And then you mention the dog. The funny part is Kincaid's dog's name is Jason, who resurrects Freddy and brings him back to life. But that's kind of foreshadowing maybe in the future some can look at it for Freddy versus Jason.
Yeah, because Freddy resurrects Jason.
Jason, yes, which is kind of funny. It was an okay movie. I think The Dream Warriors is better, in my opinion.
I think movie-wise, you're probably right.
But I don't think it was a bad follow-up.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think this Dream Warriors was like a little higher and standard, and then this one was slightly below it. I think what really hurt this movie a lot was
the karate.
It could have been the karate, but there was a writer's strike at this time. So there were so many rewrites, and they didn't have, the script fully written out. And then from what I read, the script was, the scenes they shot were written maybe a few hours before they shot them due to the writer's strike. So that could have affected it a lot. What could have been if the writer's strike didn't happen? Is it a horrible movie? No. Is it the greatest? Probably not. Like I said, it's a little bit below Dream Warriors, but it's still watchable. I mean, Robert Englund does a great job as Freddy.
Absolutely.
But let's move on to our next one.
Faster than a bastard maniac. More powerful than a local madman. It's Super Freddy. Told ya, comic books was bad for ya.
Nightmare on Elm Street, The Dream Child, made in 1989. This movie was directed by Stephen Hopkins, who's known for Predator 2, a swole favorite, Judgment Night, Blown Away, The Ghost in the Darkness, and Lost in Space, the remake. This movie starred Robert Englund, Lisa Wilcox, Billy Joel, Minter, and Danny Hassel reprising his role. This movie had a budget of $8 million and only made 22.1 at the box office. So tell me what you think of The Dream Child.
This is to me where the franchise went off its rails. This is where they leaned in that bastard son of 1,000 maniacs. And she's in love with her boyfriend. And like this movie is, that TikTok thing where they do that TikTok like trend where they do that thing of a series and they're like they play like a video or an audio clip and they're like when it's good they go woo woo, and when it's bad there's The Rock and he goes, this is an absolute piece of crap. To me, this movie is an absolute piece of crap.
Yeah, you basically summed it up perfectly. This movie, it's kind of hard to follow what the hell is going on.
It's so bizarre, dude.
It's so confusing. And I recently watched it the other day, and I still was confused by it. They brought back Alice and Dan, even though Dan dies in this movie. It has again great effects for the kills. But another thing too was this movie was censored by the MPAA due to the gruesomeness and gore. So a lot of the kills we got weren't that great. I do, however, love the comic book death that we played when Super Freddy shreds the guy who's obsessed with comic books. He cuts him.
Yeah.
That's awesomely done. The effects actually still hold up to this day. But besides that, this movie wasn't that good.
It's a piece of crap.
Yeah, and one of the things that stick out to me about it has nothing to do with the movie. It's just the fact that Kool Moe Dee has a song at the end of the movie called "Let's Go," and it has the Vincent Price laugh, and that was like a whole diss track towards LL Cool J because they were feuding at the time, and that's the only reason it sticks out to me.
Wow.
This movie was not very memorable besides the comic book death, and I thought it was confusing as hell.
I remember the sheer look of disappointment in my dad's face when he took me like on Friday to rent a movie at Lion Video on Bartlett Road in Streamwood. And this is the movie I picked out. Like you would think that I just told my dad that like, you know, like I got fired from my job or like, I'm a Packers fan. And like the look of disappointment in his face when I picked this movie out, I'll never forget it.
Yeah, I don't blame him. This movie's just really bad.
Yeah,
That's all I can say about it, man. Let's just move on to the next one.
it's brutal.
All right, once again, this is your brain. This is your brain on drugs. Questions?
Yeah! What are you on? Looks like a frying pan and some eggs to me.
Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare, released in 1991. This is actually directed by the only female director of the series, Rachel Taylor, who actually directed Tank Girl, but she did produce Hairspray, Crybaby, and The Borrowers. And this was actually produced by two well-known people. Michael DeLuca, who did Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. He also did The Mask, Don Juan DeMarco, Dark City, which is a great movie, Lost in Space, and Blow. So a lot of Johnny Depp there. And it was also produced by Robert Shea, who wrote the first two movies and produced them, Bob Shea. And he also worked on the Lord of the Rings trilogy. This movie stars Robert Englund, Lisa Zane, Sean Greenblatt, Leslie Dean, and Yaphet Kotto. This movie had a budget of 11 million and brought in 34.9 at the box office. So, Swole, the reason I mentioned Rob Shea and his connection to Lord of the Rings is because this movie actually had a written screenplay by Peter Jackson. And Peter Jackson's original script actually had Freddy aging and growing weak within the dream world, where the teens of Springwood would have drug-fueled parties and literally beat the shit out of them in the dream world, which to me sounds hilarious, but the movie studio passed on it.
I'd watch that over this.
Totally would. But I just found it interesting that Peter Jackson wrote, the script, a screenplay for this. And Peter Jackson, I think, released Dead Alive already previous to this, which is actually a pretty decent horror movie. It's just kind of be one of those what ifs. This movie has some, I guess, ambiance and the fact that it has Breckin Meyer's feature role. I do love the fact that he's in there. His death scene's pretty cool. The whole Indagata de Vida when he goes
Yump.
to TV.
Yump. That is the reason that I hate this fucking movie.
Really?
So we were that I went to Green Bay a couple weeks ago for the Bears game, and we had to drive from Kelly's cousin's house, and I'm riding shotgun in her cousin Paul's truck, and he's got a nice big Ford F-150, and he's got his Spotify playlist going through Spotify, Apple Music for life. And Inagata Davida comes on and he goes, "I'm gonna make you listen to this whole song." And I'm like, the only thing I think of when I hear this song is Breckin Meyer's death in Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, and I hate this goddamn song. I hate this song. There's only one instance that I like this song, and it's when Bart Simpson replaces all of the church music with Inagata Davida, because I thought that was hilarious. This movie is awful. It didn't make any sense to me. I hate it. The movie, the franchise did not get back on its rails until the next movie, which I thought was a really, really good interpretation of, what was to come in movies, foreshadowing or whatever. This movie sucks, in my opinion.
It sucks, but it's not as bad as the previous one. So it had some merit there. I like all the cameos in this movie. Besides Breckin Meyer in here, I like that Roseanne Barr and Tom Arnold are in here as the motherless, the fatherless, and motherless children parents. I love that Alice Cooper plays his dad. This movie was shot in 3D, so you got the 3D glasses when you went. I think when we rented it from Masterpiece Video on 47th, they gave us 3D glasses we could watch it, but It didn't work. But yeah, just that it had like a little. It was like campy. It's kind of the send off to the series, and this is before Craven got back involved. And I guess we can thank this movie for getting Craven back involved.
Yeah, this is awful.
Yeah, it was New Line Cinema's first 3D movie. What I didn't like is they changed the damn song to the Jump Rope Girls.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't
and
even remember. That's how much.
well, they didn't even have him do it. They had it on like newspapers throughout the whole fucking movie, and that was horrible. And then they changed the lines, and I was just like, "This is stupid." But it's not the worst of the series. It's definitely not the best,
Yeah, I get it.
but it wasn't that good.
Not my thing, man. Not my thing.
Yeah, I mean, it does kind of give the backstory of how Freddy got his powers, but I mean, I wish they could have done it better. But you alluded to the next one we're going to talk about, so let's move on to that one.
Miss me?
Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which was released in 1994. This one was written and directed by Wes Craven. It stars Robert Englund, Heather Langenkamp, Miko Hughes, and John Saxon returning. This movie had a budget of $8 million and a box office of 19.8. Swole, tell me about New Nightmare.
I really like New Nightmare because Heather Langenkamp came back, and to me, she's always going to be Nightmare on Elm Street. But it also was like what happens when movies become like reality. Like it had that weird aspect to it where it was all during the filming of it, and stuff came to life. I enjoyed this movie. I don't know how you feel about it.
No, I actually totally really like this movie. I like a fresh spin, and as we look through Wes Craven's career, from doing The Hills on Eye, The Hills Have Eyes the original Nightmare on Elm Street to eventually this, and then to Scream. He's always
Well,
reinventing the horror genre.
and I think this is the precursor to Scream. Like what happens when you watch too many scary movies was like what Scream was, and this is like when scary movies like come to life.
Yeah,
I think this was a precursor to that, and it might have been an inspiration for it. Like I dug this movie. I also think that's one of the dopest movie posters
yeah, yes,
for,
it totally is.
for people that are watching the YouTube stream later on during the week. That movie poster I think is dope.
I totally agree. I think he did this excellently, and I forgot to mention earlier when we were going over Nightmare, the original Nightmare, when Freddy's actually set on fire and he chases Nancy up the stairs. The stunt guy who actually played that role of Freddy at the time for the fire stunt was the original Ghostface in the first two movies, which I thought was cool.
Roger
I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but
Roger yeah, I did Roger something. Sorry, I know that. I'm so disappointed in myself.
I should have wrote his name down. It's one of the few times that I write, but I was actually just watching something that mentioned that. I'm like, oh, I gotta tell Swole that.
Roger L. Jackson.
There you go, Roger L. Jackson.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. This movie I thought was done greatly. Great different spin on the story. I love the fact that it's a movie within the movie that Heather Langenkamp has, basically is playing herself in certain ways.
Yeah.
I love that they actually show us, when Tina gets killed in the original Nightmare, you just see her go up, to
The
up the
ceiling.
room. Yeah, and this movie they actually show what Freddy's doing, which I think is pretty cool. The Freddy in here is more closer to the way Wes Craven wanted him to be. He's not really funny. He's more serious, and he's a dark entity or a spirit that takes the form of Freddy, which I thought was really done well. I love Robert Englund in anything he does. I do love the part where he comes out for the talk show and he's
Yeah.
going around like giving everybody high fives and like.
You remember a TV show on ABC back in the day called Just the 10 of Us?
No.
So it was a sitcom, and it was like a goofy, funny sitcom. But Heather Langenkamp is in this. Is in this. She plays, I think the oldest daughter of this family of 10, and her younger brother, who's like 14, 15, is really, really into horror movies. And I remember this because I was into horror movies. And he wears like Freddy Krueger shirts throughout like the show, and he's got like Nightmare on Elm Street posters up on his wall. And it was just a really fun homage to Heather Langenkamp and Wes Craven. But it was on ABC, and it ran for a few seasons. But that I thought that was a super cool like little Easter egg too for all the Nightmare on Elm Street nerds.
Yep. Totally agree. You know, this is what, like I said, Craven wanted Freddy to be like. He did regret changing his experience, his appearance. He said that he shouldn't have just left. He should just left it as the previous Freddy. But I think it's a good change. I think I love how this is the last movie that Craven's involved in with his characters, and I think he ended it the way he wanted to. And I think this movie is just a great way of ending the the original. I consider this part of. It's not the original 6, but it caps off that series. That franchise is done.
I agree.
But let's move on to our next one.
You're the one that kept
Oh, don't worry about my little Aaron, boy. The only thing to fear is fear himself. Oh.
Freddy vs. Jason, released in 2003. This movie was directed by Ronnie Yu. He also did Bride of Chucky and a couple of Hong Kong features, The Bride with White Hair and the sequel. And he also did this is for you, Magnificent Stan, Legacy of Rage, which was Brandon Lee's first movie role.
Oh, what was Brandon Lee in?
He was in this awesome movie called The Crow.
Legacy of Rage was his first movie role?
Yeah.
And then what was it? Was it Rapid Fire and then The Crow? Or was there another one in there?
He did I don't know if the Legacy of Rage was the one. I think there was a one called Laser something, and he did Showdown Little Tokyo with Dolph Lundgren. Then he did Rapid Fire, and then I think The Crow. Those are like his 2 standalones.
Interesting. Okay.
But yeah, Brandon Lee, I like Brandon Lee a lot. But
So this is what happens when Yump and I just talk movies. Like, it's almost like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Like, oh yeah, he was in this, and that guy did that. And I'm like, oh yeah. And then our conversation can go on for like hours.
Definitely. So this movie stars Robert Englund coming back as Freddy, and this is the last time Robert Englund would play Freddy. Ken Kurtzinger comes back as Jason. Comes and plays Jason, and there was a lot of fans who were unhappy because they wanted Kane Hodder to play Jason. And the only reason Kurtzinger was chosen was because he was taller, which I think is complete bullshit. You should have brought back Jason. Kelly Rowland's in it, Monica Keena, Jason Ritter, Christopher Rodriguez Marquez, Tom Butler, Brendan Fletcher, and Lockley Monroe. This movie had a budget of $30 million and made a box office of $116 million, making it at the time the most profitable Freddy movie. This movie was number 8 in the Nightmare series and number 12 in the Jason series. Off the bat, I know as a kid, this was something we talked about, Freddy versus Jason, because we all saw Jason Goes to Hell.
Yep.
And Freddy grabbing his mask and pulling it down. It was something we wanted to see. I love that Robert Englund is back. I do love that they bring back Jason's mom, Mrs. Voorhees, in this movie. He plays a cameo. This movie is what it is. I think it was mostly a cash grab.
So this is where like the horror movie nerd in me geeked out. I was so excited to see this, and I feel like I could be honest with the audience. I think Monica Keena is smoking hot, like smoking hot. She played Kristen in Entourage, which everyone knows is my favorite TV show of all time. But I thought this was just a fun little, like, sometimes you just do shit for the fans. And this was for the fans. Yeah, did it make a lot of money? Absolutely. But and I haven't seen this movie in years, but I just remember loving this movie when it came out. And it's probably not that great, but it was for the fans. Because Yump, you said it perfectly. Every kid in the 80s had this conversation. Who's better, Jason or Freddy? Who would win in a fight? Right? And they found a way to put it in a movie. Was it goofy as hell? Yeah, absolutely. Where Freddy was like, kids weren't remembering Freddy, so he needed to get his kills up. So the kids remembered him. But I loved it. I won't talk bad about this movie. I wish they made a sequel.
Well, the thing is, the original idea for this movie was actually Jason versus Michael Myers, and that was actually talked about in the 90s.
Well, everyone knows who would win that fight.
Yeah, Michael Myers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the reason that wasn't done was because they were really
piss off Nom.
I know it is. But they were too similar. So that's when they started floating the idea that Freddy versus Jason, and like I said, in Jason Goes to Hell, Freddy grabs his mask. Now, what I thought was cool, just reading in and doing a deep dive like a nerd, like we always do on all this stuff, is the original ending was supposed to have them both end up in hell and try to continue to fight, and it to be broken up by Pinhead. But Miramax owned Hellraiser, and they were playing, hardball to get that trademark out, so they scrapped that part. There was supposed to be a sequel to this that never, did anything. You mentioned earlier the original crossover was supposed to be the Evil Dead and Freddy. It's supposed to be Ash versus Freddy, and they actually released comic books, that kind of did the sequel to this, and then they also the Ash versus Freddy aspect.
Yeah.
To me, it's not a horrible movie. I just think it was a cash grab, but I do love the fact that Robert Englund comes back. This is the last time he plays Freddy, and he's more animated than usual. I did find it interesting that they offered this movie to Rob Zombie, and he turned it down to do House of a Thousand Corpses. They said that there was 300 gallons of blood used for this movie, which is crazy.
Can you imagine what this would have been like if it was a Rob Zombie movie?
It would have been a lot darker.
It would have been a lot darker and lots of neon black light.
Definitely.
I
And
like your basement.
yes, a Funko Land. But two things that stick out to me about this movie is one, the sheriff is played by the guy from Night at the Roxbury, so I cannot imagine him out of that role. And the second is the character that's a stoner in this movie. I don't know if it was directly referred to, but he was totally a ripoff of Jay from Jay and Silent Bob.
Absolutely, 100%.
And he gets killed pretty bad.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I saw this down at ISU, and I remember really, really liking it. Maybe I'll turn it on here after we catch the tail end of the Sunday night football game. But I did not hate this movie.
No, definitely didn't hate it. I think, like I said about the previous entries, this is definitely not one of the worst. It's enjoyable. You have to accept it for what it is.
Absolutely. You're not going to get The Godfather or Goodfellas. It's a Freddy versus Jason.
Yeah. And let's go on to our final one, Swell.
No, it's not real.
It's real. I'm real.
Nightmare on Elm Street, the remake, released in 2010. This movie was directed by Samuel Bayer. Samuel Bayer has no movie credits to his name besides this movie, but he's known for music videos and commercials. He's done Pepsi commercials, Coke commercials. He's done Smells Like Teen Spirit. He directed that music video. He directed Until It Sleeps by Metallica and Boulevard of Broken Dreams by Green Day. This movie was also produced by Michael Bay, who we know from The Rock, Transformers, and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles reboot.
Yeah, but like Michael Bay, like what was it like? Because he was also in charge of like producing the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies. Like, what the hell, Michael Bay?
I think also, I don't know how much he had involvement. I think he just threw his name on it to try to give the ambiance, which it seemed to work in terms of I actually saw this movie in theaters. It stars Jackie Earle Haley, which we mentioned earlier was the person that accompanied Johnny Depp to his audition for the original Nightmare, which I think is crazy. Rooney Mara, Kyle Gallagher, who was in Smile, and this is one of his first roles. Katie Cassidy as well. It had a budget of 35 mil, and it made a box office of 117 million, and this is the most profitable Nightmare movie. In terms of this movie, I love Jackie Earle Haley. This is coming off when he just did, Semi-Pro. He did The Watchmen. He was just getting back into the swing of things as an actor. He had been retired for a long time and got back in. He was coming off the success of that. I didn't mind him being cast. I just think that the way he played Freddy wasn't the way that we would see him. This movie tried to be too serious, adding, Freddy as a sexual assaulter.
That's
with the child murderer, and I didn't like that aspect of it.
Well, that's the thing. In the original movies, it was always insinuated. You never know what Freddy did, like if he just killed kids or if he was like a child molester. But this one flat out just didn't pull any punches. They were like, yeah, Freddy Krueger molested little kid.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was going for be a more serious movie, which I could see, but yeah, it didn't do it for me. I don't like the way he looks. And Jackie Earle Haley said that they asked him how he got into the mindset of being Freddy, and he said I had to sit in makeup for 6 hours, and when you get done with that, you want to kill someone.
Huh.
So I can understand him, but he looks horrible. His voice is not. I mean, we're all used to Robert Englund. Robert Englund. Like when we think of Freddy, you think of Robert Englund.
It's iconic.
But I didn't expect him to be Robert Englund. I wanted him to, do his own take on it, and it just wasn't. It didn't hit for me.
I mean, I agree.
But I do think his acting role outside when he's the human form Freddy, I think it was better. But that's what Jackie Earle Haley does. He's a better actor that way.
Right. Also, a large portion of this movie was shot in Illinois.
Yes, it was.
Like, I think they used Conant High School in the northwestern suburbs for some of those like high school shots, stuff like that.
Yeah, and Robert Englund saw this movie, and he was before he saw it, he was a big supporter of Jackie Earle Haley. And when he saw it, he wasn't a big fan of it. Wes Craven hated the fact they rebooted it, that he's had lost the rights to Nightmare and they rebooted the series. He hated that.
Honestly, like the way Hollywood is now, I'm surprised that they haven't tried to do another one, like reboot it again, because Freddy's name and like the glove carry a lot of weight.
Yeah, and so doing a deep dive on this one, because wondering, like I said, this movie made 117 million on a $35 million budget. One of the producers, Brad Fuller, said that while the movie was a financial success, the backlash from fans, critics, and the industry professionals alike made it to the point where they decided not to make any more.
I mean, I get it. I was, I don't want to say fortunate, but I was one of those morons that contributed to that $117 million box office because I saw it at AMC River East, and I was jacked. I was amped. The trailers that they cut made it look good. I was excited. I'm like, Jackie Earle Haley, that could be creepy. I loved him in Watchmen. His role in Semi Pro was completely different than anything. Like, he's just the stoner that hits the half court shot. I tried cashing it. Did you take it to a big bank?
Yeah, Dukes. His name was Dukes.
Dukes. I was excited for it, and it just did not, like, it didn't do it. I walked out like, what the hell? Kind of the way like I did at Halloween Kills. I'm like, are you serious right now?
Yeah, and Jackie Earle Haley was in Shutter Island too, previously to this.
Man, I haven't watched Shutter Island since probably it came out as well. I might need to go back and revisit that.
But just like the aspect that he was in those, The Watchmen, Shutter Island, and then he was in Semi Pro, but then like he followed that up with The Watchmen, Shutter Island, and then he did this movie. He was like on a hot streak. Luckily for him, he did do Dark Shadows after this, which is an okay movie, but he did Lincoln, and so yeah, kind of back on track.
Did you say Dark Shadows was an okay movie?
Yeah,
are you talking about the Dark Shadows that Tim Burton directed with Johnny Depp?
Yes, because it's got Johnny Depp in it, bro.
Are you crapping me, bro?
Dude, like, it's a guilty pleasure, bro.
I mean, I get it. Like,
oh, it's not no masterpiece, but I'll watch it.
Oh my god! Did you watch the soap opera when it was out?
No. I never heard about it until I watched this movie. Just because it has Johnny Depp in it, I watched it.
I mean, I had a buddy that like his mom had every episode of that soap opera like recorded on VHS, and like once a year they would go through and rewatch it, and it was a giant piece of shit. Like, it is, though. I do not understand how anybody watches that shit. It was a soap opera, like All My Children or General Hospital, but about fucking vampires.
Trying to be serious, man.
It was awful. I swear to God, I would rather sit in Lambeau Field in a Bears jersey, like surrounded by being the only Bears fan in there, than watch that show.
I never seen it, so I probably won't watch it. This movie it doesn't really take itself seriously.
It's goofy, it's campy.
Which is why I'm like, okay.
It's like Rob Zombie's version of the Munsters.
Yeah, so that's why I'm like, it wasn't that bad. But I was okay. I wasn't the greatest movie, but I mean, it wasn't horrible. Like this movie is worse than Dark Shadows. I'm not gonna lie to you, because this is a retelling of a movie that I loved and
that you love. I get it. I just like, that was, Dark Shadows was the first Blu-ray that I ever bought.
That's why you don't like.
I was working at Best Buy at the time, and I'm like, oh, I want to watch this. It's Tim Burton. I love Tim Burton movies. Who doesn't love Tim Burton movies? I'm like, I'm just gonna buy it. Like, I just upgraded my Blu-ray player, and I watched it, and I was like, I can't believe I spent $24 on this shit.
I think I saw this movie the first time was like on USA at night. Now, not like USA or something like that. and I just happened to watch it. Or TNT. It just seems like a TNT movie.
Dude, do you remember USA at Night when they would show scary movies like
All night. Yep. Up All Night.
That shit was awesome.
Or TNT Monster Vision with Joe Bob Briggs.
Yeah, with Joe Bob Briggs, who was played by what's his name?
Oh, I don't know his real name. I just know him as Joe Bob Briggs.
Isn't it? Hold on, I got it. Give me a minute.
John Irving Bloom.
Yeah, that dude was awesome. Wasn't he in Casino?
Let me see.
Wasn't he like
Yes, he was.
Wasn't he the hillbilly cousin that Sam fired?
Yes.
Yeah,
he was.
One of two things happen: either you're in on it, or you're too stupid to manage it. Either way, I can't have you running my casino.
Yeah, he actually does I think a new Last Drive-In show.
I would watch the shit out of that.
That does like horror movies. Cinemassacre has a lot of collaborations with him. He's an interesting guy. He's he kind of put horror movies back on the map. Campy horror movies. He's like a more popular version of Svengoolie.
Yeah,
you know who
Svengoolie is more vocal. That's like a regional thing.
Yeah, he's a more popular version of him. But yeah, as far as this movie, you can totally tell how much we liked it by as much as we stopped talking about it. But it wasn't
like an Ebert and Roper thing. You know how they did like 2 thumbs up? Like ours should be like, I don't know, like fart noise would be the thumbs down. Like
completely. This movie's just horrible.
It's crap.
Yeah, and I'm glad, I guess this movie had to happen so no other remakes are made. I hope they don't remake the original.
They will. At some point, they'll be like, hey, we're going to try this again because this is a franchise that prints money. Like, even this piece of shit made $117 million.
I know there's been rumblings about it. They've asked Robert Englund to come back as Freddy. And he's thought about it, but Robert Englund's like 75 years old.
I think the hard part right now is that New Line Cinema still owns the rights, and I think the rights might be up in limbo.
Yeah, I don't know.
I know that's why a new Friday the 13th movie hasn't been made in a while. There was supposed to be a sequel to that remake, and it never happened. I know it didn't like do as great at the box office as they thought it would, but I thought that was a pretty damn good like reboot of that franchise.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, so me personally, I have this, when I think of the horror genre, I think of 3 characters. In terms of the popularity, and don't kill me, but I don't include Michael on that because I think Michael's movies after 2 kind of like Michael Myers, that is kind of like diminished his worth in the horror genre. Freddy and Jason and I think Leatherface were making through the first 3 movies of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We're making are like the 3 unholy like icons of the horror franchise. I think Michael has his place and he's just kind of on the cusp of the outside.
Yeah, and I don't agree with that at all.
I know it's just the way I feel because
and that's okay. That's okay. That's what these conversations are for. If to me the Holy Trinity is Michael, Freddy, and Jason, and I think Leatherface is just on the because like really Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 and 3, like
see,
Dennis Hopper, like
2 is actually not as bad as people think. 2 is just a totally different type of movie, and if you want to talk about 2, Kevin Smith actually said 2 is better than the original, which for some it's crazy to say, but it's just Kevin Smith talking. But I think in terms of like Texas Chainsaw Massacre came out was like the most bloodiest movie in there. But my whole point about bringing those 3 up is they've all gone through remakes. Friday the 13th was done pretty well. They had Jason ran, and it's one of the things I remember about that remake was he ran in that movie. He didn't walk. Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake with Jessica Biel was not good. This Nightmare on Elm Street movie was not good. The only franchise of a remake that actually turned out to be decent, long and behold, was the Halloween series. Now, you know how I feel about Halloween Kills.
I mean, at some point,
it wasn't as bad as
tonight.
Yeah, it wasn't as bad as this remake. And Halloween Ends is coming up. It wasn't that those movies. They're not the best.
I think the original remake of Halloween, the 2018 version, I think was a good movie.
Yes, and then the second one I didn't think was that.
I think the second one was a good movie till about 20 minutes left.
Yeah, I love Rob Zombie's vision on movies, but I think the first one was was okay. I didn't think it was great, and then the second one it kind of lost me.
The second one with the white horse and the shit like that.
There was just too much going on.
So bizarre. I couldn't even. Come on, dude. Figure it out, man. Like, yeah, no. H2, and you know what's weird is like those movies weren't available to purchase digitally anywhere for the longest time. And now all of a sudden, like they're like $4.99 on iTunes. Buy them on Movies Anywhere.
It's because with the craze that's coming out now.
Well, no, it's because the rights were originally belonged to the Weinstein.
Yeah, and we know how great they are with them.
And those rights still haven't flipped over for Dogma because I would love to own that digitally.
That front doesn't look too good. Kevin Smith talked about that not too long ago, saying he doesn't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, it sucks.
But with that, Swole, let's move on to our coming soon. Why don't you tell everybody what's going to happen in our next episode?
So I think we discussed this before we started recording. We're going to talk about the greatest horror movie franchise to ever exist, the Halloween movies, right? That's what we discussed?
I don't know about the greatest, but we're going to talk about it.
Okay, so the greatest franchise in Halloween horror movies, Michael Myers, we're going to talk about on our next episode. I think we're really, really excited about that. And I think those are movies that I know all by heart because they're very, very special to me. And I'm excited to talk about that.
Yeah, so am I. And the series will end with a review of Halloween Ends, as we'll both see it by then, and we'll give our thoughts about it.
Absolutely. I'm very excited to see that Thursday night.
Yeah. But with that, guys, that's going to be probably the end of our show. But before I get to Swole's final point, I just want to say thank you again for everybody that listened. Shout out to Herb Lawrence for coming on. Herb, we really appreciate you coming on. Do check out thetangglove.com. I've been doing 31 Days of Horror for the Yumper and Svo show, so I'm releasing videos every day of a obscure horror movie that is good to check out if you haven't heard about it, the not so popular ones. Every day at 10 a.m. there will be a new video on the Tinted Glove YouTube, or you can check us out at thetangglove.com where I have all those blogs up.
Follow us on Discord too.
Yes, and we have a Discord link. Check us out at the Yumper and Svo Twitter handle. Or you can just DM us and you can get an invite to it. It's trying out something new. We might have some trivia there one of these days and more interaction with our communities for both the Tinted Glove and for Yumper and Svo. But with that, Svo, take it away.
Oh, that's a good pick of me for the final thought for the YouTube listeners. This was taken outside of Lambeau Field, and I rocked the mustache, so that's pretty good. No, my final thought is Halloween Ends comes out on Thursday, and if you are a fan of horror movies, get your ass to the theater and support your local movie theater. I've been, 3 times in the past, 2 weeks. I go whenever I can, and take care of yourself and take care of each other. Lift each other up and be good to yourselves. That's all I got, guys. Till we see you in 2 weeks. Deuces.
Thank you for listening to Yump and Svo at the Show podcast, a Tainted Glove production.
See you in your dreams. Oh, come back anytime. Bring your friends.